For over 1,000 years, they were the masters of the Aegean Sea. We're talking about brilliant artists, engineers, and traders. They built a civilization so advanced that it literally became the stuff of myth. And then, they were gone. They disappeared, leaving behind a puzzle that has fascinated and frustrated us for centuries.
It's a secret that's been locked away in a language we can't read, and a history that's been buried under layers of earth. But today, thanks to some really cutting-edge science, we are getting closer than ever to cracking the code of the Minoans. So let's dive in and take a look at the clues.
All right, first things first, let's get properly introduced to the Minoans, the civilization that really laid the foundation for so much of what we think of as Western culture.
So picture the island of Crete, back in the Bronze Age. The Minoans weren't just a civilization, they were a powerhouse. They weren't just building towns, they were creating these huge, sprawling palace complexes, like the famous one at Knossos, that had multiple stories and even running water. Their ships were all over the Mediterranean, controlling the trade routes. And their art, wow. These incredibly vibrant and lively frescoes show a culture that was just bursting with energy. And, maybe most important of all, they could write. They developed the very first writing system in Europe.
And that right there is the million-dollar question. For all of their amazing ruins and beautiful artwork, the Minoans themselves are completely silent. We can see what they did, but we have no idea what they thought, or what they believed, or even what they called themselves. Their entire story is locked away.
So our first major clue to unlocking that story is hidden in these strange symbols they carved into clay tablets, their mysterious script.
It's called Linear A. Now you might have heard of its successor, Linear B. That was a script of the Mycenaean Greeks who came later. Linear B was famously cracked back in the 1950s, and it turned out to be an early form of Greek. But Linear A? That's a whole different ballgame. We can recognize a lot of the symbols, but if we try to read them using Greek sounds, the words are just gibberish. The language of the Minoans is a total unknown.
Just take a look at this. This is what we're up against. For more than 100 years, the smartest linguists and codebreakers have been staring at tablets exactly like this one, trying to figure out what they say. Are these just shopping lists? Are they religious hymns? Royal histories? Without the key, they're just silent artifacts from a world we've lost.
For decades, everyone tried to connect Linear A to other known languages from the ancient world, like languages from Anatolia or Semitic languages, you name it. But every attempt just hit a dead end. So with all the traditional methods pretty much exhausted, researchers are turning to a tool that the Minoans could never have even imagined, the computer.
The power of this is just incredible. Researchers have scanned and digitized every single piece of Linear A writing we have. Then, they unleash a custom Python program to run what they call a brute force attack. It's basically like a password cracker. The computer systematically takes patterns from Linear A and compares them against the entire vocabulary of dozens of ancient languages, just hunting for a match that's too strong to be a coincidence. It's a huge task, but it might just be the thing that finds the key to unlocking the language.
But the script isn't the only code we're trying to crack. There's an even older code, the one that's written in our very genes. And it's starting to tell us who the Minoans were and where they actually came from. In a really incredible study, scientists were able to pull out and sequence the entire genomes of 19 different ancient individuals from Crete and mainland Greece. I mean, this is amazing. For the very first time, we can look right past the pottery and the ruins and analyze the biological identity of these people directly.
And what they found was fascinating. Turns out, the genetic recipe for a Minoan was about 75% descended from the very first farmers who came to the area from Anatolia thousands of years earlier. The other big piece of the puzzle, about 15%, came from people way to the east, from the Caucasus and modern-day Iran. This totally flips the script on old theories that they were colonists from places like Egypt. Nope, for the most part, they were locals.
But here's where it gets really crucial. When you compare the Minoans to the Mycenaeans who came after them, you see a key difference. The Mycenaeans have that same basic ancestry, but they've got an extra ingredient mixed in, DNA from the Eurasian steppe, far to the north. This is a huge deal, because that specific migration is tied to the spread of Indo-European languages, like, early Greek. The Minoans have zero of this steppe DNA. It creates this clear genetic dividing line between them and the Greek-speaking Mycenaeans.
This DNA data isn't just about ancient migrations, though. It can actually bring us face to face with the Minoans themselves and help us build a much more vivid picture of their world.
So, we've all seen those famous Minoan frescoes, right? They show these athletic people with long, flowing dark hair and big dark eyes. For a long time, people wondered, well, was that just how they liked to paint people, or is that what they really looked like? Now, with their actual DNA, we can find out.
And the answer is a definite yes. The genetic analysis predicts with a really high probability that the Minoans had brown eyes and brown or black hair. The science perfectly lines up with the art. It means when we look at these ancient paintings, we're probably looking at a pretty realistic portrait of what these people actually looked like.
It's this exact combination of being so incredibly advanced, but also so mysterious that has fueled all kinds of theories. For years, people have pointed to the Minoans as the real-life inspiration for Plato's story of Atlantis. You know, a powerful island empire that was wiped out by a catastrophe. And while that's still pretty much a fringe theory, it just goes to show you the powerful hold this lost civilization has on our imagination.
So, after all this new research, all this new data, where do we actually stand? What have we finally learned about Europe's first great civilization?
Well, we can now paint a much clearer picture. We know their genetic origins are with the first farmers of the region, plus a later mix from the east. We know their art was telling the truth about what they looked like, and we know that they were the primary genetic ancestors of the Mycenaean Greeks who came after them. They weren't just wiped out and replaced by foreigners. Their DNA is still alive and well in modern Greeks.
We've cracked their genetic code. We can see their faces in their artwork and know that we're looking at real people. But that ultimate prize, it's still just out of reach. Will that brute force attack on Linear A finally pay off? Will we ever be able to read their words, to understand their thoughts, and to finally truly hear the voices of the Minoans? That's the question that keeps the search going.